we start seeing the immigration problem. And you look at your massive land basically in the middle of nowhere, you're your own continent, it makes no sense whatsoever. Logic and reason and all these things, they're all antithetical to progressive politics. The question is, A, can you do it? And B, what price will you pay in the long term? If that means that then all of your young people are only going to learn from the quote unquote trusted sources who are only teaching leftism, well, then you might sort of have your answer as to why they're doing it right there.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV Australia. I'm your host, online editor Alexandra Marshall, and today we have a very special treat. We are joined by Dave Rubin, the comedian, host of the Rubin Report with over 3 million subscribers on YouTube, and of course the best-selling author of Don't Burn This Book and Don't Burn This Country. Dave, welcome to the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And, you know, I was supposed to be on tour in what was that, spring of 2020 for Don't Burn This Book, in tour in Australia. That got canceled by COVID. So better late than never. I'm finally making it back to your fair continent.
Yeah, everything got cancelled in COVID, including the laid-back Australia that everybody knows and loves. Look, you have upgraded your warning to Don't Burn This World. That's the name of your show that is coming to Australia. It's going to Melbourne on October 18, Sydney on October 21, and Brisbane on October 27. All the information will be on your screen and attached to this post. Don't Burn This World. Dave, is this an invitation to Pyromaniacs Anonymous, or are you worried?
I suppose it is. It's also kind of my final warning. You know, Don't Burn This Book really was me laying out my classically liberal principles that are the principles that America was founded upon, that most of the Western world was founded upon. Don't Burn This Country was sort of, okay, we now understand what we're fighting with wokeism and collectivism. What are the ways that you can maximize your life within this crazy time we live in? And I wrote that book about 2 years ago. And Don't Burn This World, which I've sort of sketched out as a book, but really is the name of the tour that I'm going on, and the message that I'm now sharing with the world is, guys, we are on the precipice of giving away Western civilization, free societies that are tolerant and decent. And I mean tolerant in the true sense of the word, not tolerant in the squishy way. We are about to hand them away. We're giving them up to the radical leftists, to the Marxists, to the Islamists, to the jihadists. And too many of us in the West have grown fat on our freedoms. We don't know how to defend ourselves. We don't know how to make arguments for our past or our present or our future. And I see many of the same problems in Australia that I see in the United States. And by the way, they're the same problems that are happening across Western Europe, and they're even happening in South America. I mean, the internet has now put everything at scale. So when a problem starts in America, it can get across the world very, very quickly. And sometimes problems start elsewhere and land on our shores. So yes, it is a warning. And I hope that for the pyromaniacs out there, maybe we can get a few of them to use the fire retardant instead.
Yes, well, you did transition from being in progressive politics to conservative politics, which sounds a bit shifty, but we'll let you into the country. To be fair, it will probably help you get your visa, because our government has a history of just not allowing conservative speakers to come to Australia. Is this a case of you're sheltering under the wing of the Republican conservative movement while the left go totally through their manic phase, or have you actually had a revelation personally and changed your politics forever?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, you go on these press tours and sometimes you get a lot of the same sort of questions over and over, but that's a great question because it's deep and it's real. Look, you know, about 10 years ago, when I was fully part of the leftist movement here in America, I was on the Young Turks Network, which is a very far left network. I saw a lot of what now everyone knows as wokeism and identity politics and all of these things. I saw it, you know, about 10 years ago, very, very intimately, because I was working at a network that was pushing so much of this stuff. And I just started saying, guys, are we the liberals here? What are we doing as it pertains to free speech? Why are we demeaning all of our ideological opponents constantly? Why are we trying to cancel everybody? And this was before cancel culture even. And because I started pulling on that thread, what happens very quickly when you're on the left is, if that thread gets pulled, you know, if you see something that's not quite right and you're really willing to see it, you will wake up very quickly. And especially if you're working at an institution like I was that was so embedded in that progressive world. So I started fighting for true liberalism, and true liberalism, which is about individual rights and laissez-faire economics and live and let live and logic and reason and all these things. They're all antithetical to progressive politics. Now, to the deeper part of your question, am I just sort of hanging in this conservative umbrella at the moment? Well, I would say from an American perspective, and I can't quite comment on this from an Australian perspective yet, but this is partly why I'm so excited to go to Australia. Donald Trump has created an unbelievable wide tent MAGA movement. So Donald Trump himself is not a traditional conservative. Donald Trump himself is not particularly religious. Everyone knows that. Donald Trump, I don't think in his heart of hearts, particularly cares about abortion one way or another, and yet has been the most pro-life president we've had probably in my lifetime. Donald Trump is the first incoming president for the first time to ever be for gay marriage. Not even Barack Obama was his first time in. So Donald Trump has widened the conservative tent enough that for whatever little differences I have with conservatives at this point, and there are some, but I would say it's increasingly small, I would say I am perfectly welcome within that. Now, there might be some religious conservatives that aren't thrilled with some things about me, but generally speaking, people on the right are much more willing to live and let live and battle that out. And also understand that America is a country of 350 million people. You better get used to not being able to, demand that everyone lives like you live. That's one of the things the progressives and certainly the Islamists have in common. They want everybody to come to all of their positions the second they do, otherwise you'll be canceled or worse. Conservatives generally have people think of conservatives as closed-minded, but generally they're actually more open-minded. So I hope I fit in that tent. But look, politics changes all the time. 10 years from now, the tent could be frayed apart. Maybe the woke will all be destroyed and there'll be something else on the other side. And all you can do is stick to your principles more than anything else.
You'll find Australian politics looks a lot like UK politics on the surface, but with what's happening with our Conservative Party, except we don't have a Nigel Farage.
And we'll look forward in the future to working with you as sovereign.
If you disobey the rules, you get cut off.
Meanwhile, a lot of Conservatives are using MAGA republicanism to try and rescue its conservative movement domestically, because most of our Conservatives are basically what you would call moderates or left wing. So it's very confusing and we're not very happy about it. But one thing that we've done, which is quite bizarre, and as somebody looking onto our country, I'm interested to know what you think. We are blessed with this beautiful moat. I'm sure Donald Trump would have given it a great name if he was here. But we decided, for no reason at all, to manufacture a mass migration crisis. We fly people in. They don't come on boats. We bring them in. And so we are copying the spiritual, cultural, economic and political chaos of America, Europe, and also the UK. What does that make you think about us that we did that on purpose?
Well, it's quite curious to me, and this is partly why we chose to go to Australia. We're trying to do one or two big worldwide tours each year, and I was in Australia on tour with Jordan Peterson for about 2 weeks back in 2018. It was one of the most wonderful 2 weeks of my life. I had an affinity to the culture, the food, the people. Your service is a little slow, and everyone knows it, but everything else I just thought was just spectacular. There's a real deep commonality between Australians and Americans, a sort of zest for life and a fun attitude, and obviously the weather, all that stuff that you have is great. And then I saw what happened during COVID, of course, and saw the unbelievably draconian lockdowns, and it made no sense to me as an outsider. How could this be the Australian attitude? For people that know less about Australia from an American perspective, we think you're all Crocodile Dundee. How did this happen, And then, to your point, then we start seeing the immigration problem. And you look at your massive land basically in the middle of nowhere, you're your own continent. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's one thing, okay, the EU basically knocks down, largely artificial borders and people start flooding in. Okay, whether it's good or bad, I mean, in my estimation, it's bad, but you could make some argument that, all right, there was geographic reasons people could traverse this major land area. For you guys, it makes no sense. And I will say, we happen to be taping this on the second anniversary of October 7th. on October 8th or 9th, I believe it was, in 2023, when I saw those, I have no problem calling them jihadists, outside of the Sydney Opera House, calling for gassing of the Jews. I mean, one of the best days of my life was doing that one afternoon show that I did with Jordan at the Sydney Opera House on a beautiful day, that beautiful boardwalk, that majestic theater. It was the last stop that we did on the entire tour. And then to see just a few years later, that type of thing, Australia has to decide who is Australian, what makes you Australian, and you have every right to decide that as Australians. And by the way, that's what every Western country is dealing with right now. But you're right, you guys sort of self-inflicted it in a weird way, where some of the Europeans, I think they thought, oh, Brussels is doing some stuff, it has nothing to do with us. Then it just showed up there. You guys have a separate landmass in the middle of the water, halfway across the world. It seems like particularly bizarre, I would say.
Yeah, no one is swimming and landing on the Northern Territory because we've got crocodiles and snakes and things. But we're chartering flights, okay? That's how they're getting into the country. And as for October 7, we had that anniversary yesterday because Australia is from the future, so we get to do things first. And 10 years ago, maybe it was 15 years ago now, I don't remember, I was in Pitt Street and I came face to face with one of these random protests, and they were threatening to murder us. And that was just kind of a thing that happened on a Monday afternoon. It was really bizarre that that's been the approach forever. I don't think our authorities really know what's going on or are prepared for it in the slightest. But I do want to ask you, this astonishing coincidence happened. You've got George Floyd and you've got Charlie Kirk, two men born on the same day, 20 years apart. They are two heroes for two very different political movements, one of the left and one of the right, and the reaction to their deaths could not be more different. I mean, we had burning and looting and violence for George Floyd, and we had prayer circles and conversation for Charlie Kirk. What does that say about the America of today? Can those two halves be reconciled, or is there a wide rift that, I mean, I'm not even sure that that can come together again in any near future?
Yeah, that's also an excellent question, because the rift is not, it's not just that the rift is wide. You can have a wide rift in politics. Somebody could be very pro-life and someone could be very pro-choice. Someone could be for no taxes and someone could be for high taxes or whatever. We can do 80 versions of all of that. But that can usually be worked out within a political system, meaning sometimes you're going to win, sometimes the other guy is going to win. You're going to have it a little more your way, you're going to have it a little bit more the other way. Okay, fine. The issue that we're having now is well, first off, those two people are completely diametrically opposed. I mean, George Floyd was a drug dealer who had been arrested multiple times and all of that stuff. I don't even want to waste time talking about him. Charlie Kirk was a great human being. Charlie was a friend of mine, somebody that I toured with many times and did a lot of those college events with. He did the thing that everyone says you're supposed to do, which is reach out to the other side. He did it more than anybody. I can tell you that in the 3+ weeks since he is gone, that the hole that we have in America feels like it's getting bigger right now, because he was sort of a bridge between those two warring factions. And now that bridge is largely destroyed. I mean, even me, I'm very willing to talk to the other side. It's very hard to get lefties that are willing to talk to you, because they'll yell at you, they'll shout at you, they will call you all sorts of names, they just generally won't talk to you. So the other part that you mentioned, of course, is the reaction to them. And I was at Charlie's memorial, which was unbelievably moving. 100,000 people for a 10 or 12 hour event was just absolutely extraordinary. I mean, everybody, on one just iota away from crying the entire time. But you're right. Why did nobody burn down a strip mall? Why was there no mass violence? Why didn't they go through New York City and ransack those stores? Well, I would say it's connected to what I said before, which is that conservatives generally have they have a better understanding of what America is. I think there is also a spiritual and religious element to it too, which, by the way, of course, was something that Charlie talked about quite extensively. And then to really answer your question, can you put those two things together? Well, again, I would say on the right, you now have all of the classical libs. So you've got Joe Rogan supported Trump, Bobby Kennedy, who was a Democrat, Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat. You've got me, you've got Bill Maher basically breaking bread with Donald Trump right now. So all of the common sense people have moved to the right, let's say. And what that leaves is sort of a clown car on the left, where nobody knows who's in charge. You have a few kind of squishy Democrats fighting against the real radicals, the Ilhan Omar, AOC types. And I don't know how you bridge that. I think you have to expose their ideas to be as terrible as they are. You hopefully have to beat them at the ballot box. But as you may be tracking, New York City, the once greatest city in the world, is about to have a full-on communist mayor. So I don't know that can be bridged anytime soon.
To be fair, that might be a good lesson for them. Let them run the experiment. Let them have the communist mayor and see. It's better to have a communist mayor quarantined in New York than have a communist president. So perhaps it's for the best. It sounds to me as if the old Democrats have been pushed off to the side permanently, and the new right might eventually split back into two sides of classical liberalism and republicanism once more, and the old Democrats might just end up gone.
Look, let me just very quickly, I think that's very possible. That is absolutely possible. What I will try to do to the best of my ability is keep that alliance together, because that to me is what gives you a wide tent, pro-America movement. Okay, we have some differences. We all do. But we love America. We love the founding of this place. We love the idea of America. We love that there's some variation and difference in how we live and all of those things. But there's virtually nothing to work with on the other side. So that really is that's the tension that we have right now, I would say.
I cried a lot over Charlie Kirk. I didn't know him personally, but I did watch his videos a lot. I was even watching them on the night before he was murdered. What I've noticed is that Australia doesn't have much young talent of its own in conservative politics, at least not holding positions of power. We've got a lot of keen people, but nobody who's actually leading a movement. So our kids are on TikTok, they're on Twitter, and they're listening to the Nigel Farages, the Trumps, the Charlie Kirks, the Dave Rubins of the world, the Joe Rogans. That's where they are getting their corresponding narrative to oppose what they're taught in school, which is very left-wing over here, probably even more left-wing than your schools, if you can believe that. So my question is, what's going to happen when in December Australia is banning social media and also things like YouTube and Google and things for people under 16? Everyone else has to prove who they are. I mean, that's going to disrupt the youth political movement, surely, and entrench this propaganda.
Yeah, I read a bit about this, and we don't talk that much about Australia. Like, something has to go really awry in Australia for us to talk about it. So, for example, COVID and a lot of what was going on in Melbourne, we really talked about because it seemed so crazy to us. But there's very little generally that makes it from Australia into our news cycle. However, this situation with social media and the idea that you're going to ban kids and basically prohibit them from social media. First off, there's no real way to do it. As I understand, like they're going to try to figure out several ways that parents won't even be able to give access, even if they want it. Look, that's just like, you're just basically chasing, you have a little hammer and you're chasing a mouse constantly. It's not going to really, really work. And I hate to tell the people in power, but the kids are probably going to be smarter than you when it comes to using apps and phones and devices and everything.
Oh, we were. That was 20 years ago, right?
Right. So that's one version of it. But to whatever extent it can work, well, first off, having heard you say that there are, very few, let's say younger people that are talking about the news in the way Charlie was, I hope I can find them when I'm there. And I would gladly elevate their voices and have them on the show, because you need a version of that. You don't want all of the sanity to be something that you're importing, right? You want sane people on the ground that can fight for Australian values. From an Australian perspective, Western values are universal, but there's something unique about Australian culture, and you need your own people to stand up for your country. So that's one part. I don't know if it will work. Look, I understand the inclination to get children off of these devices, right? I'm on this device. Look, I have my battery pack on it because I'm on so much during the day, right? We're all on these things too much. We know it has infected brains. We know that the algorithms are manipulating people. We know that the rates of social anxiety are up, even though it's called social media. We know that suicide rates are up. We know that the gender confusion has a lot to do with what's going on online. So I get all of the reasons that people would want to prohibit this as much as possible. The question is, A, can you do it? And B, what price will you pay in the long term? If that means that then all of your young people are only going to learn from the quote unquote trusted sources who are only teaching leftism, well, then you might sort of have your answer as to why they're doing it right there.
Yes, I think motivation does matter. If your motivation is to stifle any and all conversation or political opposition to an indoctrination course, I think that's a bad idea. There are plenty of things around safety that, as someone who used to work in the AI development industry, I'm worried about. I mean, I've gone back to a paper diary, but I don't think banning kids from the internet's a great idea. And look, the one thing you said, there's not many, young people, and you want to connect and elevate their voices. I think what Charlie Kirk realized, and what others like you have realized, is there's no one coming to save us. Well, our great figures of history are just that. They are lessons, they are names, it's history. If no one else is going to save the world or stop from burning, as you were saying, then it's going to have to be people like you, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Spectator TV Australia.
Well, Alexandra, it's going to have to be people like you, and it's going to have to be people like everyone watching this, right? None of the people that we look back on, from your country's history to mine, they weren't exceptional people, other than they stepped up in the moment that they lived in. And that's what we're all going to have to do. I get the inclination. I get why most people are just like, I won't say anything now. Maybe this will pass. And you know what? There's a story about a frog in a pot, and it does not end well for the frog. So in any event, I look forward to meeting you, and I look forward to being in your great country in about 10 days from now. Unless,
of course, you're the French and they just ate everything in the pot. Sorry, Australians still have French jokes because we were British. Look, everyone, you have to go buy your tickets to Dave Rubin's show. I'll be in the Sydney one. You want to go there. Thank you so much, Dave.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you.